The bell over the diner door screamed like a warning shot, sharp and metallic, slicing through the low murmur of morning voices. Every head turned at once. Coffee cups froze mid-air. Forks hovered inches above chipped plates. 4 men in dark coats filled the doorway, their shoulders broad enough to block out the grey Ohio daylight, their eyes scanning the room with the calm precision of people trained to control chaos. And behind them, an older man stood still, watching, waiting. No one noticed Michael Harris at first. He was behind the counter. Sleeves rolled up, hands wrapped around a white ceramic mug that had long ago lost its shine. The coffee inside trembled, rippling in tight circles, not from his hands but from the sudden silence that pressed in on the room. Michael felt it before he understood it. That pressure, that sense that something irreversible had just crossed the threshold. The oldest waitress, Carol, inhaled sharply. "What on earth?" she whispered, not finishing the sentence. The grill hissed and popped behind her bacon fat, snapping like static. A trucker near the window lowered his newspaper an inch. The cook in the back leaned out, eyes narrowed already, counting exits. The men didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their presence rewrote the rules of the room. Michael set the mug down slowly. His eyes flicked to the clock above the pie case. 7:20 in the morning. Too early for trouble. Too early for mistakes. His jaw tightened. He wiped his palms on his apron, a habit born from years of nerves, then stepped forward, heart thudding against his ribs. This diner had survived worse. Recessions, layoffs, the steel mill collapse that hollowed out half the town and left the other half clinging to routines like life rafts. Beacon Diner wasn't pretty. Vinyl booths cracked with age. The floor tiles shifted when you walked too fast. The air smelled like coffee that had been reheated one too many times, and the faint metallic tang of old pipes. But it was familiar, predictable, safe. Until now. The 4 men split apart with quiet coordination boots, soft against linoleum. They didn't touch anyone. They didn't have to. People moved instinctively, chairs, scraping back bodies, shrinking into themselves. One of the men paused near the door, hand resting near his coat pocket, not threatening, just present. A reminder. The older man followed last. He didn't wear a coat, just a simple wool jacket, dark slacks, polished shoes that had never seen grease. His hair was silver, neatly combed back. His face lined not with age but with intention. He took in the room the way a judge surveys a courtroom, not curious, assessing. His gaze landed on Michael. It held. Michael felt the look like a weight. He had been invisible most of his adult life. The middle-aged waiter, the single dad who worked mornings and disappeared before dinner, the man people spoke over around past. This was different. This man saw him, not as help, not as furniture, as a variable. The older man took one step forward. "Michael Harris," he said. Voice low, controlled, carrying easily through the room. It wasn't a question. Michael's stomach dropped. He swallowed. "That's me," he said. His voice came out steady, surprising even him. Carol hissed his name under her breath. The cook muttered, "What did you do?" without looking at him. Michael didn't answer. His mind raced through possibilities. Past due bills. Medical debt. That parking ticket he forgot to contest. His son. Ethan. School. Custody. His pulse hammered harder. The man nodded once, satisfied. "We need to speak with you. Now." About what Michael asked. He kept his hands visible, resting them flat on the counter. He had learned long ago that sudden movements made people nervous. People with power, especially. The man's lips pressed into a thin line. That would be better discussed somewhere private. The word private echoed. It didn't sound like a courtesy. It sounded like a verdict. Around them, the diner breathed again in shallow bursts. Someone coughed. A spoon clinked against porcelain. Outside, a delivery truck groaned past, oblivious. Life uncaring moved on. Michael glanced toward the corner booth by the window. The seat was empty. It always was at this hour now. The old man who used to sit there hadn't shown up in days. That absence had already lodged itself under Michael's skin, an unease he couldn't shake. He didn't know why his eyes went there now, but they did. Habit, or instinct. "I can't just leave," Michael said. "I'm on shift." The older man tilted his head slightly, studying him. "You won't be gone long." One of the men near the door shifted his stance. "Just a fraction. Enough." Michael exhaled through his nose. He untied his apron fingers, moving on muscle memory. Carol reached out, caught his wrist. Her eyes were wide, glossy. "Mike, don't," she whispered. "You don't know these people." He gave her a small look, a look that said he knew, that he didn't have a choice. "Cover for me," he said quietly. She nodded, even as fear creased her face. Michael grabbed his jacket from the hook behind the counter. It was thin, frayed at the cuffs. He shrugged into it, suddenly aware of how small he felt, standing among men who carried themselves like consequences. As he stepped around the counter, the older man watched him closely, eyes flicking to his shoes, his posture the way he held himself. "You're punctual," the man said, as if noting a line item on a report. Michael didn't respond. They moved toward the door. The men parted, forming a corridor. The bell rang again as they stepped outside, the sound sharp, final. Cold air hit Michael's face. The street was damp, the sky low and colorless. A black sedan idled at the curb engine, humming smoothly expensive and out of place among rusted pickups and faded storefronts. The back door opened without a sound. Michael stopped. Just for a second. He looked back through the diner window. Carol stood frozen, one hand pressed to her mouth. The cook stared, spatula hanging useless at his side. A few regulars watched with the dull curiosity of people who knew this moment would be talked about for years. He thought of Ethan. 10 years old. Too thin. Too quiet lately. He thought of the note he'd left on the counter that morning. "Don't forget your lunch. Love you, Dad." The older man leaned in slightly. "You can walk back in there," he said calmly. "Or you can get in the car. Either way, what's coming doesn't change." Michael's throat tightened. He nodded once and stepped inside the sedan. The door closed with a soft, heavy click, the sound of a seal breaking. As the car pulled away from the curb, Beacon Diner shrank in the rearview mirror, its flickering sign buzzing faintly against the morning gloom. Michael sat back, hands clenched on his knees, heart pounding, mind spiraling. He didn't know yet, that this moment had nothing to do with mistakes he'd made. It had everything to do with who he was. And someone somewhere had been watching for a very long time. The car didn't speed. That was the first thing Michael noticed. No sirens, no urgency, just a smooth, deliberate glide through streets he'd walked 1,000 times, but never truly seen from this angle. Storefronts slid past the tinted windows like faded photographs. A pawn shop, a closed pharmacy, the old Union Hall with peeling paint and a banner from an election nobody remembered caring about. This town had learned how to decay quietly. Michael sat rigid in the back seat, shoulders squared, eyes forward. His reflection stared back at him in the dark glass, older than he felt, younger than his bones said he was. The men beside him said nothing. The older man across from him opened a leather folder, then closed it again without reading, as if the contents were already memorized. "You're probably wondering why we came to you," the man said at last. Michael let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "I'm wondering if I need a lawyer." A faint smile touched the man's mouth. Not warmth, recognition. That depends on how you choose to proceed. The answer landed heavy. Michael shifted in his seat. "I haven't done anything illegal." "No," the man said easily. "You haven't." The car turned onto the main road leading out of town. Fields stretched on either side, winter brown and flat, dotted with abandoned machinery, half swallowed by weeds. Michael's pulse quickened. "Then maybe you should tell me what this is about." The man studied him for a long moment. His eyes were pulled sharp, unsettlingly alert for someone his age. "Tell me something first," he said. "Why did you keep that corner booth empty?" Michael frowned. "What?" "The booth by the window. The one no one sits in anymore." Michael's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected that. He hadn't realized anyone noticed. "Because it's reserved," he said. "For whom?" "For someone who might come back." Michael replied, then stopped himself. He looked away. It felt wrong to fill it. The man nodded slowly, as if a final box had been checked. "That answers more than you realize." Silence pressed in again, thicker this time. The car merged onto the highway. Michael's mind raced pieces, sliding around without fitting. The empty booth, the old man, the sudden absence, and now this. They drove for nearly an hour. The landscape changed gradually. The sagging barns gave way to office parks. The cracked sidewalks smoothed out. Signs grew newer, cleaner, more confident. When the car finally exited, Michael felt the shift before he saw it. Order. Money. Control. The building they pulled into wasn't flashy. No glass tower, no name in lights, just a solid brick structure with manicured hedges and a flagpole out front. An American flag hung still in the cold air, heavy and deliberate. Inside, the warmth hit him first, then the quiet. Carpet swallowed their footsteps. The receptionist looked up, eyes flicking briefly to Michael, before settling back into polite neutrality. She didn't ask for names. They ushered him into a conference room. Large table, high-backed chairs, a window overlooking a parking lot filled with vehicles that cost more than Michael's apartment building. The men took positions along the wall. The older man sat across from Michael and finally opened the folder. "My name is Charles Whittaker," he said. "I represent the estate of Henry Whitmore." The name landed like a stone dropped into deep water. Michael's chest tightened. "Henry," he said, barely audible. "Yes," Whittaker replied. "You knew him as Henry." Michael stared at the table. Images flashed through his mind. A thin hand wrapped around a coffee cup. The way Henry always waited until the diner quieted before speaking. The way his eyes lingered on Ethan. Not intrusive, just aching. "Is he?" Michael swallowed. "Is he gone?" Whittaker inclined his head. 3 nights ago. Peacefully. The room seemed to tilt. Michael gripped the edge of the table, grounding himself. He hadn't expected grief to hit this hard. He hadn't realized how much space Henry had occupied in his days until that space collapsed inward. "I should have checked on him," Michael said hoarsely. "You did more than most people ever did," Whittaker said. "You showed up." Michael looked up sharply. "That's why I'm here." "That's part of it," Whittaker said. "But not all." He slid a document across the table. Michael didn't touch it. "What is this?" "A preliminary notice," Whittaker said. Henry anticipated resistance. He was thorough. Michael let out a bitter laugh. "Resistance from who?" Whittaker's gaze hardened. "From his family." The word carried weight. Michael straightened. "I don't want trouble." "You already have it," Whittaker said calmly. "You just haven't felt it yet." He stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Henry's children cut him off years ago. Publicly, privately, financially. They wanted control without responsibility. He refused. He walked away." Michael frowned. Then why me Whittaker turned. Because Henry believed legacies rot when they're passed down without character. He didn't leave you everything. He didn't leave you nothing. He left you a test. The folder opened again. Papers spread out. Numbers Michael didn't want to look at. "Henry purchased the diner 2 years ago through a holding company," Whittaker said. "He never told the owner who he was selling to. He wanted to see what kind of place it would remain, without interference." Michael's breath caught. "So all this time—" "Yes," Whittaker said. "You were working for him." The realization hit like a delayed impact. The warnings, the cut hours, the way the owner always seemed nervous when Henry was around. Michael felt foolish and exposed. Whittaker continued. "Henry created a conditional trust. Small distributions, oversight, benchmarks. The diner is the first." Michael finally looked at the papers. The words blurred. "I don't know how to run a business. You know how to run a room," Whittaker said. "That's harder to teach." Michael shook his head. "Why would he do this?" "He barely knew me." Whittaker's voice softened. "He knew exactly who you were. He knew you were offered a bribe and refused. He knew you covered shifts for a man older than your father. He knew you kept that booth empty." Michael felt heat behind his eyes. "I didn't do it for him." "I know," Whittaker said. "That's why he chose you." A knock interrupted them. One of the men stepped forward and murmured something into Whittaker's ear. Whittaker's jaw tightened. He turned back to Michael. "They know you're here." Michael's stomach dropped. Who Henry's son and daughter-in-law, Whitaker said. They've filed an injunction to freeze all trust activity. They're claiming undue influence. Michael laughed, sharp and humorless. From me, I poured him coffee. Whitaker met his gaze. Exactly. The men along the wall shifted, subtle but alert. The air changed. Tense. Electric. You can walk away, Whitaker said. Right now, decline the trust. Go back to your life. Michael pictured the diner, the empty booth, Ethan's face when he asked why Henry stopped coming. He thought of the town, of men his age working 3 jobs and still losing ground. He thought of Henry's eyes, watching, measuring. No, Michael said quietly. Whitaker studied him, then nodded. Then we begin. Outside clouds rolled low and heavy, promising snow. Inside that quiet room, a line had been crossed. Not loudly, not heroically, but with the steady resolve of a man who had been underestimated his entire life and was done pretending otherwise. The injunction hit before Michael made it home. His phone vibrated once on the passenger seat, then again, each buzz tighter, more insistent. Whitaker glanced at the screen and exhaled through his nose. They're moving faster than I expected. Michael stared out the window as the city slid by the afternoon light, flattening everything into grey plains. What does that mean for me? It means they're trying to scare you, Whitaker said. It means they think you'll fold. The car turned onto a quieter street. Michael's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles ached. I won't. Whitaker studied him. Be careful saying that. Resolve is admirable. Inexperience is expensive. They dropped him 2 blocks from his apartment, not at the door. Whitaker's idea. Less spectacle, less opportunity. The car rolled away without ceremony, leaving Michael alone with the cold and the echo of decisions he could no longer reverse. His building smelled like old paint and boiled cabbage. The stairwell light flickered as he climbed, one hand on the railing, the other gripping the folder Whitaker had given him. Each step felt heavier than the last. By the time he reached his door, his chest felt tight, like he'd been holding his breath for hours. Inside the apartment was quiet, in the way that always made him think of guilt. Ethan's backpack leaned against the wall. A half-finished drawing sat on the table crayons, scattered like a small, abandoned battlefield. Michael set the folder down and sank into the chair. He rubbed his face with both hands, pressing until sparks flared behind his eyes. Dad Ethan stood in the hallway, hair still damp from a shower pajama top twisted sideways. He looked smaller than he had that morning. Michael forced a smile that didn't quite land. Hey, buddy. Mrs. Lane said you left work early, Ethan said. Not accusatory, just observant. Something came up, Michael said. He pulled out the chair beside him. Come sit. Ethan climbed up, swinging his legs. He glanced at the folder. Is that about Mr. Henry? Michael closed his eyes for a second. Yeah. Ethan's face fell. Is he sick? Michael shook his head. He died. The word hung there. Heavy. Final. Ethan swallowed. Did he hurt? No, Michael said softly. He went peacefully. Ethan nodded, absorbing it in his own way. He promised to teach me how to castle in chess. "I know," Michael said. His voice wavered. He cleared his throat. "He left you something." Ethan's eyes widened, like what Michael opened the folder and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a simple wooden chess piece. A rook, worn smooth. Ethan reached for it, reverent. He said, "This one protects the king," Ethan whispered. Michael watched his son turn the piece over in his hands, the grief and wonder mingling on his face. In that moment, the weight of what Henry had done pressed down on Michael harder than any legal threat. This wasn't money. It was intention. A knock at the door shattered the quiet. Michael's heart jumped. He stood, slowly motioned for Ethan to stay put. The knock came again, firmer. He opened the door to find a woman in a tailored coat, hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp and assessing. A man stood just behind her. Expression, bored, expensive watch flashing at his wrist. "Michael Harris," the woman said. "I'm Eleanor Whitmore." The name landed like ice water. Michael stepped back instinctively, blocking the doorway with his body. "This isn't a good time." Eleanor smiled thinly. "It never is when you've taken something that doesn't belong to you." Ethan peered around Michael's leg. "Dad." Eleanor's eyes flicked to the child, then away. "We can do this the easy way," she said. "You sign a statement declining the trust and this all goes away." "I didn't take anything," Michael said. "He gave it to me." Her smile vanished. "My father was not in his right mind." "That's not what his lawyer says," Michael replied. Her gaze hardened. "His lawyer works for the estate. I am his blood." The man behind her chuckled softly. "Look at the place," he said. "You really think you belong in this world?" Michael felt something settle in his chest. Not fear, resolve. "You don't get to talk to my son." Eleanor's lips pressed together. "This is your warning. Walk away." She turned and left without waiting for a response. The man followed, shaking his head. "Some people just don't know when to quit." The door closed. Michael leaned against it, heart pounding. Ethan tugged at his sleeve. "Are they bad?" Michael knelt, meeting his son's eyes. "They're angry," he said. "And angry people say things they don't mean." "Are we in trouble?" Michael hesitated. Then, honestly, maybe. Ethan nodded solemnly. "Okay." Later that night, after Ethan was asleep, Michael sat alone at the table. The folder spread out before him. He read slowly, forcing himself to understand. Conditions, benchmarks, oversight, names of people who would watch Judge Measure. He read Henry's handwritten note again. "Trust is built by what you do when no one is counting." His phone rang. Whitaker's name glowed on the screen. "They came to your apartment," Whitaker said. "Not a question." "Yes." "Good," Whitaker said. "They wanted to see if you'd flinch." "I didn't." "I know," Whitaker replied. "Tomorrow we start preparing." "For what?" "For the hearing," Whitaker said. "And for something else." Michael closed his eyes. "What? Something else?" Whitaker paused. Henry left you more than a diner. He left you a voice. They don't think you'll use it." Michael looked at the empty chair where Henry used to sit, imagined the way he'd fold his hands. Listen. Wait. They're wrong. When he hung up, Michael stood and walked to the window. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and relentless, covering the cracks in the pavement, smoothing the jagged edges of the town. He thought of the men who would wake up tomorrow and do the same jobs, fight the same quiet battles. He thought of Ethan asleep in the next room, dreaming of rooks and kings. Michael wasn't a king. He knew that. But he understood something Henry had learned too late. Power didn't start in boardrooms. It started in rooms like this. Small, ordinary, where choices were made without witnesses. And tomorrow, the counting would begin. Morning came hard and grey, the kind that pressed against the windows like a judgment. Michael woke before the alarm, heart already moving faster than his thoughts. Snow dusted the fire escape outside, thin and deceptive, covering rust, with something almost gentle. He lay still for a moment, listening to the building breathe the pipes, clicking a radio, murmuring somewhere below. He thought of Henry, of how the old man had once said, "Winter made liars of strong things." The diner opened at 6. Michael arrived at 5:45, keys cold in his hand. The owner wasn't there. The lights were off. The sign buzzed weakly as he flipped the switch. Inside the place looked smaller than it had yesterday, like a room after an argument. He walked the floor slowly, counting steps, without meaning to touching the backs of chairs, the edge of the counter. At the corner booth, he stopped. He didn't sit. He stood there, hands in his pockets, and let the quiet settle. Carol came in, 10 minutes later, stamping snow from her boots. She froze when she saw him. "You're early," she said. "I couldn't sleep." She set her purse down, eyes searching his face. "They came by last night. 2 men. Suits. Asked for you." Michael nodded. "I know." Her mouth tightened. "You okay?" He hesitated. "I don't know yet. By 7, the diner filled? Not like it used to, but enough." Regulars slid into booths, coats draped, greetings exchanged. The bell rang. The bell rang again. Michael worked the floor like muscle memory. Coffee poured, plates, set orders called. He felt watched. Not by the customers, by something else. By the idea of being measured. At 7:15, a man he didn't recognize took the corner booth. Late 60s, clean jacket, hands steady. Michael's chest tightened. He approached anyway, voice even. "Coffee." The man looked up, eyes sharp, curious. Black. Michael poured. The man watched him closely. "You work hard," he said. Michael shrugged. "Someone has to." The man smiled faintly. "That's usually the answer." In the kitchen, the grill flared. Carol hissed something at the cook. The day pushed forward. Michael's phone vibrated in his pocket again and again. He ignored it until 10, when the rush thinned and the air settled into a tired rhythm. He stepped into the back hallway and checked the screen. Whitaker. 3 missed calls. 1 message. Hearing moved to today. 1 p.m. Be ready. Michael leaned his head against the wall. Today. He closed his eyes and counted to 10. Then he straightened, walked back out, and tied his apron tighter. At 11:30, 2 men entered the diner. Not the ones from before. Younger. Haircuts sharp enough to cut glass. They didn't order. They stood near the counter and watched Michael work. He felt their eyes follow him, cataloguing his movements. His pauses, the way he spoke to Carol, the way he bent to listen to a customer with a tremor in her voice. Carol leaned in. "Friends of yours?" "No," Michael said quietly. They stayed until noon, then left without a word. When the door closed, the room exhaled. Michael untied his apron and handed it to Carol. "I need you to cover the afternoon." She didn't ask why. "Go," she said. "We'll be fine." Outside, the snow had turned to slush. The car Whitaker sent was understated. Dark patient. Inside, Whitaker sat alone, eyes on a tablet. "They're trying to intimidate your witnesses," he said without preamble. "I don't have witnesses." "You do," Whitaker replied. "You just don't think of them that way." The courthouse was older than the town wanted to remember. Stone steps worn smooth, metal detectors humming. Michael felt every pair of eyes as they walked in, felt the press of expectation. Eleanor Whitmore stood near the doors, immaculate, flanked by 2 attorneys. She met Michael's gaze and smiled. It wasn't polite. It was satisfied. The hearing room smelled like paper and dust. The judge sat high expression carved from patience. Whitaker spoke first. Clear, controlled. He outlined Henry's intent, the conditional trust, the oversight. Eleanor's attorney countered with practiced outrage. Words like undue influence and manipulation dropped like coins on a table. Michael sat still, hands folded, listening. When his name was called, he stood. The room shifted. He felt it. Skepticism. Curiosity. Dismissal. "Mr. Harris," the judge said. "Did you solicit any gifts from the decedent?" "No," Michael said. "Did you isolate him from his family?" "No." "Did you receive compensation for your kindness?" Michael swallowed. "No." Eleanor's attorney rose. "Isn't it true you stood to gain financially from maintaining a relationship with my client's father?" Michael looked at Eleanor, then back to the judge. "I stood to gain a cup of coffee, poured slower than usual. A conversation. That's all." A murmur rippled. The judge raised a hand. Whitaker leaned forward. "Your Honor, may Mr. Harris address the court briefly?" The judge studied Michael. "You may." Michael felt his heart beat in his throat. He thought of Ethan, of the rook, of the empty booth. He spoke carefully, not loudly. Henry came in every morning. Same time, same seat. People walked around him, talked over him. I didn't do anything special. I noticed when his hands shook. I noticed when he needed time. If that's influence, then we're all guilty of it. Silence held. The judge nodded once. "The injunction is denied pending full review. The trust remains active under supervision." Eleanor's smile vanished. She leaned toward Michael as they stood to leave. "This isn't over." "I know," Michael said. Outside, Whitaker exhaled. "That bought us time." "Time for what?" "For the other shoe," Whitaker said. Henry left instructions beyond the diner. Michael felt a chill. What instructions? Whitaker handed him a sealed envelope. He wanted you to decide when to open it. Michael didn't open it. Not yet. He went home. He cooked dinner. He helped Ethan with homework. They played a game of chess on the floor pieces, clicking softly deliberate. When Ethan went to bed, Michael sat alone at the table, the envelope heavy in his hand. He broke the seal. Inside was a single page. Henry's handwriting, careful and firm. If you're reading this, they've begun to circle. They always do. I didn't choose you to fight them. I chose you to outlast them. There's a meeting in 7 days. You'll be invited. You won't be welcome. Go anyway. Michael folded the letter and looked around the small apartment. The hum of the refrigerator. The snow tapping the window. He felt fear, yes. But beneath it, something steadier. A sense of alignment, of being exactly where he was supposed to be. He stood, went to the window, and watched the town settle into night. Somewhere decisions were being made. He would be part of them now. Not because he wanted to be, because he had been chosen. The invitation arrived by courier the next morning. Thick paper, embossed seal, the weight of it undeniable, even before Michael opened it. He didn't need to read the heading to know what it was. His hands paused, breath held, then he slid a finger under the flap and pulled the card free. Special meeting. Attendance required. 7 days. Downtown. The address alone felt like a border crossing. He set it on the table and stared at it, as if it might move on its own. Ethan padded in from the bedroom, hair sticking up, eyes still soft with sleep. "What's that?" he asked. "Something I have to go to," Michael said. "Like court." Michael hesitated. "Bigger." Ethan nodded, accepting that without fully understanding. He poured cereal milk, splashing too hard, then glanced back. "Mr. Henry would have liked that you're doing big things." The words hit harder than Michael expected. He looked away, nodded once. "Maybe." The week that followed tightened around him like a wire. Every day brought something new. A letter from the bank requesting documentation. A call from a reporter who knew his name but not his story. A man in a grey sedan parked across from the diner for 2 hours and left without coming inside. Carol noticed. So did the regulars. Conversations hushed when Michael passed. Eyes lingered. Some curious, some suspicious, some quietly hopeful. Whitaker kept him busy. Documents, briefings, long explanations that ended with the same warning. Don't improvise, don't react, don't speak unless invited. Michael listened, nodded, asked questions when he needed to. At night, after Ethan slept, he read Henry's notes. Not plans, observations, people, patterns. Who spoke first? Who waited? Who mistook volume for authority? On the 5th day, Eleanor came back. This time she didn't knock. She was sitting in a booth when Michael walked in, coat draped neatly beside her hands, folded on the table like she belonged there. The diner was half full. Carol caught his eye from the counter tension written in the set of her shoulders. Michael approached slowly. "You should leave." Eleanor looked up, eyes cool. "Sit." He didn't. "I'm working." She smiled faintly. "So was my father. Every day. And you took advantage of that." Michael felt heat rise in his chest. He kept his voice level. He made his own choices. He was lonely, Eleanor said. And you were convenient. A couple at the next table went quiet. The man stared into his coffee. The woman's jaw tightened. Michael leaned in just enough for Eleanor to hear him. Lonely people aren't stupid, and kind doesn't mean weak. Her smile faltered, just for a moment. Then it hardened. You're out of your depth. That meeting is not a diner. They will tear you apart. Then why are you here? Michael asked. Eleanor stood, gathering her coat. Because I wanted to see if you'd beg. She walked out without another word. The bell rang. The sound lingered longer than usual. The night before the meeting, Michael couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to Ethan breathe in the next room. He thought of the men who would sit across from him. Men who spoke in percentages and margins. Men who had never wiped down a counter or waited for someone else to finish their sentence. He wasn't afraid of them. Not exactly. He was afraid of failing Henry, of failing himself. Morning came clear and cold. The car arrived at 8. Michael dressed carefully. Simple suit, clean lines, nothing flashy. Whitaker watched him adjust his cuffs. They expect you to perform, he said. Don't. The building downtown rose from the sidewalk like a statement. Glass and stone. Guards at the entrance. Names checked against lists. Michael felt eyes track him as he walked through the lobby. Felt the weight of recognition without respect. He didn't rush. He didn't slow. He moved like he belonged. The room was already full. Long table, leather chairs, bottled water untouched. Eleanor sat near the front, speaking in low tones, to a man with silver hair and a tight smile. She didn't look at Michael. Not yet. Whitaker guided him to a seat near the end. Remember, he said quietly. Listen. The meeting opened with formalities, legal language, numbers that floated past without meaning. Michael watched faces, who leaned forward, who checked their phone, who smirked when Eleanor spoke. He noted it all just as Henry had taught him, though Henry never used words like leverage or exposure. He used silence, patience. When the floor opened for discussion, Eleanor stood. Her voice carried smooth and confident. She spoke of stability, of tradition, of the danger of sentimentality in serious matters. She didn't say Michael's name. She didn't have to. Heads nodded, pens scratched. Then a man across the table spoke. We haven't heard from Mr. Harris. All eyes turned. Michael felt the room sharpen, like a lens focusing. He stood slowly. He didn't look at Eleanor. He looked at the others. I'm not here to convince you I belong, he said. His voice was calm, steady. I'm here because Henry believed this place needed reminding of something it forgot. A murmur rippled. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Michael continued. You talk about stability. I see a town that lost its jobs and never got them back. I see people working harder for less and being told it's their fault. Henry saw that too. He didn't want this to be preserved. He wanted it to be useful. Eleanor laughed softly. You're a waiter. What do you know about usefulness? Michael met her gaze then. I know who stays when things stop being profitable. Silence fell. The kind that listens. Michael finished. You don't have to like me. You don't have to trust me. But you should ask yourselves why a man with every option chose someone with none. He wasn't confused. He was clear. He sat. The room held its breath. Then someone cleared their throat. Another shifted. The meeting moved on, but something had changed. The air was different. Less certain. Outside, Whitaker let out a slow breath. That was risky. Michael nodded. I know. Eleanor passed them heels sharp against marble. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. On the drive home, Michael watched the city recede the glass, giving way to brick to fields. His phone buzzed. A message from Carol. We saved you a slice. The good kind. Michael smiled, small and tired. He leaned back, eyes closing briefly. The fight wasn't over. He knew that. But for the first time, he felt something else alongside the fear. Momentum. At home, Ethan ran to him, arms wrapping tight. Did you win? Michael hugged him back, breathing in the familiar scent of soap and crayons. Not yet. Ethan grinned. That's okay. You always say the long games matter more. Michael closed his eyes. Somewhere, Henry would have smiled at that. The retaliation came quietly, the way real damage often does, not with threats or shouting, but with letters. Michael found the first one taped to the diner door before dawn-white envelope stark against the fogged glass. Health inspection notice, unscheduled. Immediate compliance required. He stood there longer than he should have, breath fogging the window, feeling the shift in the air. Carol arrived minutes later, took one look, and swore under her breath. They never do this without a reason, she said. I know, Michael replied. His voice was steady. His stomach was not. By 9, the inspector arrived with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He walked the floor slowly, tapping tiles with his shoe, peering behind the counter, opening drawers that hadn't been opened in years. He found things. Of course he did. A cracked gasket on the cooler, a missing label, a sink that drained a second too slow. Each note landed like a small cut. Michael watched hands folded, saying nothing. At noon, the report was posted. Conditional pass. Re-inspection in 14 days. Carol leaned against the counter, pale. They're trying to bleed us. Michael nodded. Then we stop the bleeding. He spent the afternoon on the phone. A plumber who owed him a favor. A supplier willing to extend credit. He rolled up his sleeves and fixed what he could himself. The work steadied him. Physical, honest. When his hands were busy, his thoughts slowed. The second blow came that evening. The bank froze the diner's operating account pending review. No warning, no explanation beyond a paragraph of careful language. Michael stared at the screen, pulse thudding. Payroll was due in 3 days, rent in 5. He closed his eyes and counted. Whitaker answered on the first ring. They're squeezing, he said. I can feel it. You're supposed to, Whitaker replied. They want you desperate. Don't be. How? By remembering you're not alone, Whitaker said. Henry planned for this. Michael dug through the folder until he found the addendum he'd skimmed before. Emergency liquidity. A bridge. Conditions attached. Oversight. He exhaled slowly. They thought of everything. Henry did. Whitaker said. They didn't think of you. The third strike was personal. A social worker showed up at his apartment on a Tuesday afternoon while Ethan was at school. Routine check, she said, polite but firm. Anonymous report. Concerns about stability. Michael listened, answered, showed her the fridge stocked with food, the clean bedroom, the stack of school papers on the table. She took notes, nodded, left with a practiced smile. Michael closed the door and leaned his forehead against it, anger humming under his skin. That night he sat with Ethan at the kitchen table, helping with homework, forcing normalcy into the small hours. "You okay, Dad?" Ethan asked, pencil hovering. Michael looked at him. Really looked. "Yeah," he said. "Just tired." Ethan nodded, satisfied. He trusted Michael the way only children do. Completely. The weight of that trust settled deeper than fear. The diner held. Barely. The repairs passed re-inspection. Payroll went out on time. Customers noticed the tension, even if they didn't know its source. Tips were a little higher. Conversations lingered. People stayed longer. A man left a note on his receipt. "Keep going." Eleanor didn't show her face. She didn't need to. Her influence moved through systems and procedures, through people who never met her, but understood the incentives. Michael learned to read it the way he read a room, where pressure would come from next, where it wouldn't. He learned who flinched and who didn't. On the 12th day, Whitaker called him into the city. Not for court, not for a meeting, for a walk. They met in a small park tucked between buildings, bare trees reaching up like questions. Whitaker handed him a coffee. "Henry used to come here," he said, "when he needed to think." Michael took a sip. "What's the play?" Whitaker looked out over the benches. "There's a vote coming. Not the big one. A procedural change. Boring on the surface. It would shift oversight from the trust to a committee Eleanor controls." Michael frowned. "Can we stop it?" Whitaker nodded. "Yes, but not by fighting it." Michael waited. "You have leverage," Whitaker continued. "Not money, not shares. Credibility. You've been quiet. You've been measured. People are watching how you handle pressure. They're comparing. So what do I do?" Whitaker turned to him. "You make it public. Not sensational. Honest. You open the books. Invite scrutiny. It's risky." Michael laughed softly. "Everything is." The diner hosted a town meeting that yet Sunday. No banners, no speeches, just coffee and chairs pulled close. Michael stood at the front, hands on the back of a chair, and told the truth. About the inspections, the bank, the report. He didn't name names. He didn't accuse. He explained. He answered questions. He listened when people spoke, even when they were angry. An older man stood. "Why stay?" he asked. "Why not sell and get out?" Michael met his eyes. "Because leaving doesn't fix what's broken." Silence followed. Then a woman near the window clapped once. Another joined. It spread hesitant but real. Not applause. Agreement. The story traveled. Not as scandal, as something else. resilience. A local paper ran a piece. No pictures of Michael in a suit. Just the diner, the people, the corner booth empty and waiting. Eleanor noticed. Of course she did. The call came that night. Her voice was cool, controlled. "You're playing a dangerous game." Michael leaned against the counterphone, pressed to his ear, the hum of the refrigerator steady behind him. "I'm playing the only one I know." "You think they'll choose you over blood?" she asked. "I think they'll choose what works," Michael said. She laughed short and sharp. "You're learning." He hung up without saying goodbye. Later alone, Michael sat at the corner booth. He placed the rook on the table, centered it carefully. Outside, snow fell again, light and persistent. He felt the pressure still there, coiled and waiting. But beneath it, something else had taken root. A quiet confidence. Not arrogance. Assurance. Henry had been right. Outlasting wasn't about winning fast. It was about standing where others stepped away. Michael stayed there until the diner closed, until the lights dimmed, and the room returned to its familiar quiet. When he stood to leave, he didn't look back. He didn't need to. The counting had changed, and this time it was in his favor. The first resignation landed on a Wednesday morning, slid under Whitaker's door, with no announcement and no drama. A committee member. Quiet, reliable. Someone Eleanor had counted on. By noon, the news had spread through the building like a hairline crack in glass, barely visible but impossible to ignore once you knew where to look. Michael was back at the diner when Whitaker called. He was refilling a cup for the man at the counter, nodding as the man talked about his grandson, when his phone buzzed. He didn't answer until he stepped into the back hallway, the smell of bleach sharp in the air. "They're starting to peel away," Whitaker said. Michael closed his eyes for a moment. "Why?" "Because pressure reveals alignment," Whitaker replied. "And you didn't break." Michael hung up and leaned against the wall, letting the relief pass through him without clinging to it. He had learned not to celebrate early. Momentum could turn. He washed his hands and went back out, picked up a tray, and kept moving. That afternoon, a woman he'd never seen before came in and ordered pie. She didn't eat it. She watched. When Michael brought the check, she asked quietly, "Are you the one?" He met her gaze. "Depends who's asking." She smiled faintly. "My brother works at the plant that closed. He said you stood up when no one else did." She slid a folded bill onto the table, far more than the slice was worth. "Keep going." The phone rang again after dinner this time from the school. "Nothing wrong. Just a reminder about a field trip permission slip." Michael signed it, tucked it into Ethan's backpack, and felt the strange comfort of ordinary obligations anchoring him to the ground. Eleanor made her next move 2 days later. She didn't call. She didn't send lawyers. She invited him to lunch. The restaurant was downtown, polished and restrained, the kind of place where the staff moved like choreography. Michael arrived 10 minutes early and waited. Eleanor entered exactly on time. She looked tired. It softened her just enough to be human. "You've caused a stir," she said as she sat. "I didn't mean to," Michael replied. "That's what makes it worse," Eleanor said. She ordered without looking at the menu. He asked for coffee. "Black." She studied him over the rim of her glass. Do you know what my father was like before he withdrew? Michael shook his head. He was ruthless, she said. Brilliant. But ruthless. He built things by breaking others. Then he broke us. Her jaw tightened. And at the end, he gives it to you. Michael listened. He didn't interrupt. You think this is about legacy? Eleanor continued. It's about punishment. Michael set his cup down carefully. Maybe it's about correction. Her laugh was sharp. You don't correct a lifetime. You don't. Michael agreed. You redirect what comes after. They ate in silence. When the check came, Eleanor reached for it. Michael let her. At the door, she paused. If you win this, she said, you won't be forgiven. Michael nodded. I'm not asking for that. Back home, Ethan was sprawled on the floor, chess pieces scattered. I beat Mr. Lane, he announced proudly. Michael smiled. Did you play fair? Ethan shrugged. I played patient. That night, Whittaker called again. The vote's been scheduled. Monday. Michael felt the familiar tightening in his chest. And you've been invited to speak. Monday arrived with clear skies and a cold that sharpened everything it touched. Michael dressed simply. The suit felt more like a uniform now than a costume. He kissed Ethan's forehead, promised to be back for dinner, and stepped into the car. The room was fuller than before. Press this time. Analysts. Faces that measured worth by proximity. Eleanor sat with her allies, posture perfect. Whittaker gave Michael a single nod. When his turn came, Michael didn't stand immediately. He waited until the room settled, until the whispers thinned. Then he rose. I won't pretend I belong here, he said. I know what you see when you look at me, but I also know what you don't see. He paused. You don't see the cost of decisions made far from the people who live with them. Henry did. Eleanor shifted, but didn't interrupt. He didn't leave me power, Michael continued. He left me responsibility, to keep something small from being erased by something large. He looked around. If that threatens you, ask why. He finished without flourish, without accusation. He sat. The vote followed. Not unanimous, but decisive. The procedural change failed. Oversight remained intact. Outside, the air felt lighter. Whittaker allowed himself a rare smile. That's as close as it gets. Michael nodded. What happens now? Whittaker glanced at his phone. Now they reassess. They did. Slowly. Deals stalled. Pressure eased. The grey sedan stopped appearing across from the diner. The bank unfroze the account. The social worker closed her file. Eleanor withdrew from public view. Weeks passed. The diner steadied. Not booming, but breathing. Michael hired one more server. He fixed the sign. He kept the corner booth empty. One evening, as he was locking up, an older man approached. Hesitant. Is it all right if I sit there? He asked, nodding to the booth. Michael considered it, then nodded. Yes, he said. It is. The man smiled and took the seat. Michael poured him coffee black and set it down gently. At home, Ethan waited up. "Did you win?" he asked again. Michael sat beside him. "We did okay." Ethan yawned. "That's good." Later alone, Michael stood by the window and watched the town settle into itself. Lights blinking on. Lives continuing. He felt the weight still there, but it was familiar now. Manageable. His phone buzzed one last time that night. A message from an unknown number. "You surprised me. Eleanor." Michael stared at the screen, then set the phone down without replying. Outside the diner sign hummed softly, steady and imperfect. Michael turned off the light and let the darkness take over, knowing the story wasn't finished, but also knowing something fundamental had shifted. The man at the corner booth was no longer invisible, and neither was he. The calm didn't arrive all at once. It crept in unevenly, like water finding cracks. Michael noticed it first in the mornings, when the diner door opened and no one flinched when conversations didn't stall at his approach when the bell rang and sounded like a bell again instead of a warning. The town adjusted the way towns always do, slowly, skeptically, then all at once. On a Thursday, just after dawn, a box truck pulled up and blocked the street. The driver hopped out, waved an invoice. New refrigeration unit. The old one had been coughing for years, kept alive by duct tape and prayer. Michael signed, watched the crew maneuver the metal bulk through the narrow door, listened to the hum settle into a steady, reassuring pitch. Carol leaned against the counter, arms, crossed eyes shiny. "About time," she said. By mid-morning, a man from the bank came in. Not in a suit this time, just a jacket and a polite smile. He ordered eggs, ate slowly, then asked if Michael had a minute. They sat at the counter. The man spoke carefully. "Apologies. Miscommunications. A reinstated line of credit." Michael listened, nodded, thanked him, and went back to work. He didn't savor it. He logged it. At school pickup, Ethan ran up, waving a paper. "Field trip got approved," he said. "And Mrs. Kent says you can come if you want." Michael smiled. "We'll see." That night, Whittaker came by the diner after closing. No briefcase, no entourage. Just a coat slung over his arm, and the tired look of a man who had learned how to wait. They sat in a booth that wasn't the corner. Michael poured coffee. Black. "There's something you should see," Whittaker said, sliding a thin folder across the table. Michael opened it. Board minutes, internal memos, a resignation letter, this one not quiet. Eleanor's name appeared twice then, not at all. She stepped down. "From anything that requires daylight," Whittaker said. "She'll keep influence, but she won't lead." Michael closed the folder. "I didn't set out to push her out." "I know," Whittaker said. "That's why it worked." They sat in silence for a moment, the diner breathing around them. "There's more," Whittaker added. "Henry's last provision. He delayed it for a reason." Michael stiffened. "What kind of reason?" "The kind that tests whether someone mistakes survival for victory," Whittaker said. He slid a second envelope forward. "Read it when you're ready." Michael didn't open it right away. He locked up, walked home, tucked Ethan into bed, listened to the steady cadence of his breathing. Then he sat at the kitchen table and broke the seal. The letter was shorter than the others. No flourishes, no riddles, If you're still standing, it means you chose continuity over conquest. Good. There is a second trust, smaller, quiet. It activates only if you ask for it. It is meant to leave this town better than it found itself. Decide with care. Michael folded the letter and stared at the table. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt wary. He slept badly. The next week brought requests. A community college director asking for support for a trades program. A union rep wanting to talk about retraining. A woman whose husband had worked the mill for 30 years asking if the diner could host meetings after hours. Michael listened. He asked questions. He said not yet more often than yes. One evening Eleanor appeared again. This time she came alone. No posture, no armor. She stood just inside the door, uncertain, then walked to the counter. "Coffee," she said. "Black." Michael poured. She watched his hands, the practiced movements, the economy of motion. "You could have crushed me," she said quietly. "You didn't." Michael set the cup down. "I didn't need to." She nodded. He always said restraint was the hardest discipline. She took a sip, winced slightly, then steadied. "I'm leaving town." Michael waited. For a while she added, "I don't know what I'll do." Neither did he. Michael said, "At first." She looked at him, searching. "Do you forgive me?" Michael considered the question. He thought of the inspections, the letters, the knock on his door. He thought of Ethan's trust, of Carol's hands shaking at the counter. "I don't think that's the right order," he said. "First comes repair." Eleanor exhaled, something like relief passing through her. She left the cup half full and walked out without looking back. Winter eased. The snow retreated. The town showed the first signs of color it had allowed itself in years. Michael hired a dishwasher whose hours had been cut elsewhere. He raised wages a notch, careful not to promise what he couldn't sustain. He opened the second trust slowly, publicly, with conditions that mirrored Henry's. Oversight, benchmarks, community seats. The corner booth remained empty until one Saturday morning when Ethan asked, "Can we put the chessboard there?" Michael smiled. "Okay." They set it up together, pieces aligned. The rook took its place. People noticed. Some smiled. Some shook their heads. The booth became something else. Not a shrine. A table. The diner hosted meetings now. Quiet ones. Practical ones. No speeches. Coffee and chairs and lists of needs. Michael sat at the back, listening. He learned which voices carried weight and which carried wisdom. He learned the difference. A reporter came by and asked for a quote. Michael declined. The story ran anyway. It focused on the town, not the man. He preferred it that way. On a bright afternoon, Michael took time off and joined Ethan on the field trip. They walked through a workshop filled with the smell of oil and metal. A man explained how machines worked. Ethan's eyes lit up. Michael felt a tug in his chest, the recognition of possibility not yet narrowed by fear. That evening, as they walked home, Ethan asked, "Is Mr. Henry proud?" Michael looked at the sky, the long light stretching the day. "I think he'd be relieved." At the diner, the bell rang. A new regular took the counter seat. Carol laughed at something the cook said. The hum of the refrigerator stayed steady. Michael moved through the room, present, attentive, unhurried. He thought of Henry's letter. Continuity over conquest. He thought of the second trust, quiet and conditional, doing its work, without applause. He thought of the town, still scarred, still stubborn, still breathing. That night, Michael closed the diner and turned off the lights. He paused at the corner booth, brushed a crumb from the table, straightened a chair. Then he left, locking the door behind him. Confident enough now to know that calm wasn't the absence of threat. It was the presence of purpose sustained by the choice to show up again tomorrow. The call came from a number Michael didn't recognize late on a Monday afternoon, when the diner was between rushes and the light slanted low across the counter. He let it ring twice before answering, his eyes still on the grill. "Michael Harris," he said. "Mr. Harris." A man replied, voice polished, practiced. "My name is Robert Klein. I sit on the Regional Development Council. We've been following your work." Michael wiped his hands on a towel. "Following how a pattern," Klein said. "One that's getting attention." Michael leaned against the counter, gaze drifting to the window, where the street reflected back a quieter version of itself. "I don't make policy," he said. "I run a diner." "That's exactly why I'm calling," Klein replied. "We're assembling a task force, revitalization, workforce reintegration. People trust you." Michael almost laughed. He almost said no. Instead, he asked, what would it require? "Your name," Klein said. "Your presence, and your willingness to be uncomfortable." Michael glanced at the chessboard at the corner booth. Ethan's pieces arranged, mid-game, paused where choices mattered most. "Send me the details," he said. That night he told Ethan over dinner. "I might have to miss a few mornings," he said carefully. Ethan looked up from his plate. "For how long, I don't know." Ethan considered this, then nodded. "Okay. Carol can make my eggs?" Michael smiled, grateful for the grace children sometimes offered, without knowing they were doing it. The first meeting took place in a municipal building that smelled of old carpet and fresh ambition. Long table, name placards, coffee that tasted like compromise. Michael took a seat near the end. He listened. The language was familiar now. Incentives, metrics, deliverables. When it was his turn to speak, he kept it simple. "People don't need saving," he said. "They need access." Some nodded. Some frowned. He noted who wrote it down. The diner felt different in his absence. Not worse. Just altered. Carol stepped into the space he left steady and capable. Customers asked after him. He returned calls between meetings, checked the books at night, made sure the second trust stayed boring and solvent. He refused 3 proposals that promised headlines and delivered little else. Pressure returned but changed. Invitations replaced inspections. Subtle expectations took the place of overt threats. Michael learned how to say no without burning bridges. He learned that power often disguised itself as generosity. One evening after a long day downtown, he found Eleanor waiting outside the diner. She looked thinner, less certain. "I heard you joined the council," she said. "Temporarily," Michael replied. She nodded. "They're going to use you." He met her gaze. "They already tried." She smiled tired. Be careful. They don't forgive boundaries. Michael unlocked the door. Neither do I. Inside the diner hummed back to life. He poured coffee for a man who'd lost his job last month and didn't know what came next. He listened. He didn't offer answers he couldn't keep. The council's proposal hit the papers a week later. A pilot program, retraining stipends, partnerships with local businesses. The diner wasn't named. Michael wasn't quoted. He preferred it that way. He showed up to the vote, sat in the back, and watched as it passed by a narrow margin. Not a victory. A beginning. The backlash came from unexpected places. A donor pulled funding. A colleague distanced himself. Michael absorbed it, adjusted, moved forward. He remembered Henry's handwriting, continuity over conquest. At home, Ethan brought home a report card. Good grades, a note from the teacher. He's thoughtful. Michael taped it to the fridge. One afternoon, the man who'd asked to sit at the corner booth weeks ago approached the counter. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what you did." Michael waited. "I'd like to help," the man continued. "I used to run logistics. Retired now, but I still know how to move things." Michael nodded. "Come by after close." The diner hosted another meeting, smaller this time. Practical. A whiteboard, lists, no applause. The second trust covered supplies. The first trust stayed untouched. Michael kept the lines clear. The council work intensified. Travel. Late nights. Michael missed 2 of Ethan's chess games and made the 3rd. He learned to forgive himself imperfectly. Then the letter arrived. No return address. Typed, brief. It referenced an asset Michael hadn't seen before, buried deep in Henry's papers. A property on the edge of town. Derelict, zoning unresolved. The letter ended with a sentence that chilled him. "They're moving on it. So should you." Michael called Whitaker. "Did you know about this?" Whitaker was quiet for a moment. "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because Henry didn't want it activated until you were visible enough to be targeted," Whitaker said. "It's a test." Michael closed his eyes. Of what? Whether you'd protect the obvious and forget the hidden. Whitaker replied. Michael drove out to the property the next morning. A rusted fence, weeds, a building long abandoned windows, boarded paint flaking like old skin. He stood there, hands in his pockets, feeling the weight of decisions converge. Back at the diner, he gathered the people who had earned his trust. Carol, the logistics man, a teacher, a former mill worker. He showed them the photos. "They want this," he said, "for reasons that won't help this town." "What do you want?" Carol asked. Michael looked around the table. "I want it to stay boring," he said, "and useful." They laughed softly. Then they got to work. The council meeting that followed was tense. Developers presented glossy slides, promises, jobs that vanished under scrutiny. Michael spoke last. He didn't argue. He described the building's history, its location, its potential as something unremarkable and enduring. A place to train, to repair, to wait. The vote was close, closer than he liked. It passed in his favor by 1 seat. Outside, Klein caught up to him. "You're making enemies," he said, not unkindly. Michael nodded. "I know, why keep going?" Michael thought of the diner bell, the chessboard, Ethan's trust. Because stopping would mean I learned the wrong lesson. That night he returned home exhausted. Ethan was asleep on the couch, homework spread around him. Michael covered him with a blanket, turned off the light, and sat for a long moment in the quiet. The town didn't cheer. It didn't need to. It adjusted again, slowly, skeptically, then all at once. And Michael, standing at the edge of something larger than himself, felt the familiar mix of fear and resolve settle into place, ready for whatever came next. The building opened without ceremony, on a quiet morning when the town wasn't expecting anything to change. No ribbon, no speeches. Just the sound of a key turning in a stubborn lock and the slow creak of a door that hadn't welcomed people in years. Michael stood back and watched the first group step inside. Boots echoing on concrete floors, scrubbed clean, but left honest. Light spilled through newly cleared windows, dust motes drifting like memory settling. They called it the workshop, because anything grander would have felt like a lie. Inside there were workbenches, donated tools, whiteboards already marked with lists and schedules, a training space, a repair space, a waiting space, boring by design, useful by necessity. Carol arrived first. Arms crossed against the cold eyes, scanning the room. "You really did it," she said. Michael nodded. "We did." The logistics man was there too, sleeves rolled up already, arguing about storage with a former mill worker who knew more about machinery than anyone had expected. A teacher set down a box of manuals. Someone brewed coffee in the corner, black, strong, familiar. The room began to hum. Outside, a car slowed, then parked. A developer Michael recognized from the council meeting stepped out, glanced at the sign, frowned, and drove away. Michael felt no satisfaction, just a quiet confirmation that the choice had been the right one. By noon, the diner was full. Not packed, steady. The bell rang with its old confidence. Michael moved between tables, present, but unhurried the way he had learned to be. The corner booth held the chessboard, now pieces mid-game, untouched since the night before. A man paused there considering it, then chose another seat. That felt right. Ethan came in after school, backpack slung low, cheeks flushed from the cold. He spotted the workshop flyer on the counter and smiled. "Is that today?" "It started today," Michael said. Ethan nodded, satisfied. He took a seat at the corner booth and studied the board. "Your move," he said. Michael sat across from him and moved a piece. The rook slid forward, deliberate, protective. The weeks that followed were not easy. Funding had to be justified. Schedules conflicted. One instructor quit without warning. Another showed up early every day and stayed late without being asked. The workshop filled slowly, unevenly, then all at once. Men and women who hadn't been called by their names in years learned new ones. Skills returned. Confidence followed, tentative at first, then stronger. The council took notice. Not with applause, with data, retention rates, job placements, quiet success. Michael attended fewer meetings. When he did, he spoke less. People listened more. Eleanor sent one final message. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement. You kept it small. Michael read it once and deleted it. He didn't need the last word. One afternoon, Whitaker stopped by the diner older somehow. The lines in his face softened. He ordered pie and actually ate it. Henry would have approved, he said. Michael wiped down the counter. He already did. Whitaker smiled. You know this won't end with you. Michael nodded. That's the point. At home, the fridge filled with notes and drawings. Ethan's handwriting grew steadier. His questions grew sharper. They played chess most nights, the game stretching longer, the silences more thoughtful. Michael lost more often now. He didn't mind. Winter returned, then loosened its grip. The town looked different, not transformed, but awake. The workshop ran 3 programs. The diner hired another server. Carol took a week off for the first time in years, and came back rested and fierce. The bank manager waved when he came in. Michael waved back and kept working. On an ordinary morning, the bell rang and an older man stepped inside, hesitant eyes searching. Michael greeted him, poured coffee, black, and set it down gently. The man's shoulders eased. Across the room, Ethan watched understanding passing between them without words. That evening after close, Michael turned off the lights and stood for a moment in the quiet. He thought of Henry, of the long mornings, and the patience that had built something no one could seize because it wasn't owned. It was shared. He locked the door and walked home under a sky clearing toward spring. This story wasn't about a diner or a building or a trust. It was about what happens when someone refuses to confuse kindness with weakness and continuity with fear. If you felt that truth land somewhere familiar, take a second to like this story, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments with these 3 words. Keep showing up.